The sound of my knee cracking against the chair leg wasn't the worst part. It was the pause afterward, that clean, antiseptic silence you only hear when a room full of people decides, together, to pretend you aren't happening. 21 relatives sat around my mother's gratitude table on Thanksgiving, and not one of them stood up. Not my aunts. Not my cousins. Not even my mother. I'm Elena Hart. I'm 31 years old. And I used to think rock bottom was losing my dad at 24 and watching our family business become a stranger's toy. But I learned something that night. Rock bottom has a basement. And it smells like cedar garland, buttered rolls, and Derek Mallory's cologne, sharp, expensive, and somehow always a little too loud. Derek, my stepfather, lifted my place card like it was trash, smiled like he was doing me a favor, and said, "Sweetheart, we need this seat for someone who's actually part of this family." I wish I could tell you I stood up gracefully. I didn't. My heel snagged the runner rug. My knee hit wood. My glass toppled. And my mother's eyes went flat, like a screen going dark. But I had no idea what was coming next. Because while everyone stared at their plates, Derek's phone buzzed on the sideboard behind him, unlocked, lighting up with a message preview that made my stomach go cold. He thought I was harmless. A quiet compliance analyst with polite manners and tired eyes. He forgot what I do for a living. I don't scream. I document. And I'd been watching longer than he realized. I didn't move back home after college. I didn't come back to the family fold. I didn't even keep my childhood bedroom. After Dad died, the house stopped feeling like ours. It became a museum Derek curated, new furniture, new paint, new rules, new versions of old stories that somehow always ended with Derek being the hero and my mother being rescued. I lived 40 minutes away in a small apartment above a florist shop, close enough to show up when guilt tugged, far enough to breathe without asking permission. Most weekdays, my life was clean and predictable, a badge to get into my building, a laptop that encrypted everything, and a desk job in anti-money laundering compliance at a regional bank. I spent my hours untangling people's lies, shell companies, odd wire transfers, loans, that moved in circles like they were trying to hypnotize you. It's not glamorous. It's mostly spreadsheets and quiet dread. But it trained my brain. Patterns don't scare me. They comfort me. The holiday season, though, Thanksgiving especially, always turned my stomach. It was the one day a year my mother demanded we play the part of a normal family, as if enough candles and roasted vegetables could cover the bruises you couldn't see. Just one day, she'd say on the phone, voice too bright. "Just come." For me. For years, I did. I came. I sat. I smiled. I swallowed comments that tasted like pennies. Derek's daughter, Sloane, always arrived last, like the rules were suggestions she found insulting. She was 26 and floated through life on a cloud of big plans, funded by money that never seemed to have a clear origin. She'd show up with new boots, a new phone, a new story. "This one's an investment," Derek would say, as if expensive taste was a retirement strategy. And my mother would nod, like agreement was safer than truth. The first time I realized something was wrong with the company was 2 years after Dad's funeral. Harborline Freight, the shipping and warehousing business Dad built from a single truck and a warehouse lease, was still running. Contracts were still renewing. Employees still had jobs. But the numbers didn't make sense anymore. Dad used to walk me through invoices at the kitchen counter like they were bedtime stories. He'd tap the paper with his old blue fountain pen, his lucky pen, and say, "If you can follow the money, you can follow the truth." After he died, Derek took the pen. Literally. He tucked it into his suit jacket at the memorial like it belonged to him. That should have been my warning. Instead, I told myself it was grief. People do odd things. If only I knew what I was walking into. A week before Thanksgiving, my cousin Maribel texted me, "You coming?" Derek's acting, intense. I asked what that meant. She wrote, "He's doing that thing where he smiles with his teeth but not his eyes." I could picture it perfectly. Derek's smile always looked like a contract. I almost backed out. But my mother called the next morning and said, "Your grandmother's coming. She won't have many more Thanksgivings, Elena." That was the lever. It always was. So I drove to the house just after noon, hands tight on the wheel, rehearsing my polite answers like armor. "Work's busy." "Yes, I'm fine." "No, I'm not dating anyone." "It's nothing." The moment I stepped inside, the smell hit me, cedar garland and roasted turkey, and underneath it, Derek's cologne, sharp as a warning. He greeted me with a kiss on the cheek that didn't reach his skin. "Look who decided to visit," he said. My mother stood behind him, adjusting the napkins, not looking up. Her hair was pinned back too tightly, as if loosening it would loosen her resolve. "Hi, honey," she said softly. "Glad you made it." And that's when everything shifted. Because I saw the table. In the center, where Dad always sat, Derek had placed a new centerpiece, white pumpkins painted gold. And where my place had always been, left of my mother, near the window, there was no card. There was a card that said Sloan. My throat tightened. It was a small thing. A piece of paper. But small things are how power announces itself. Dinner started the way it always did, with forced cheer and food arranged like a performance. My Aunt Judith complimented the rolls. My uncle laughed too loudly at his own jokes. Someone put on a playlist labeled Cozy Harvest Vibes that tried too hard to be comforting. Derek carved the turkey like he was on camera, pausing to make sure everyone saw his hands. He wore a sweater that cost more than my car payment and acted like generosity was something he personally invented. "Before we eat," my mother said, standing with her glass, "I want to say," Derek cleared his throat. "I'll handle it," he said, smiling. "It's my house too, sweetheart." It wasn't. But nobody corrected him. He raised his glass. Family. Health. And the future. Especially the future. He turned slightly towards Sloan, who sat in my old seat like she was trying it on. "To those who know what it means to carry a legacy forward." My mother's glass hovered midair. She looked at him, then down at the tablecloth. I sat near the end, beside the kids' table that no longer had kids. The chair felt smaller, as if it didn't want to hold me. Sloan leaned toward me with a grin that was almost friendly. "It's just a seat," she whispered, like she was doing me a kindness. Across the table, Maribel's eyes met mine, wide, angry, helpless. She mouthed, "I'm sorry." Derek kept talking. He started making little comments, the way he did when he wanted a reaction but didn't want to look guilty. "Some people," he said, slicing turkey, "think they deserve things because they were here first." He glanced at me. Quick. Sharp. Then away. "And some people," he continued, "earn their place. They show up. They contribute." My fork scraped my plate. I forced myself to breathe. My mother finally spoke, voice too soft. "Derek, it's Thanksgiving. And that's why honesty matters," he said, still smiling. Then, like the moment was scheduled, Sloane's phone chimed. She checked it, frowned dramatically. "Oh," she said, loud enough for everyone. The card declined again. Derek's face changed instantly. Not concern, something closer to panic, masked under irritation. "Not now," he snapped. Sloane pouted. "But it's embarrassing." I said not now. Everyone pretended not to hear. That's what this family did best. I watched Derek's hand tighten on the carving knife. He loosened it, then reached for his own phone, set on the sideboard behind him, screen facing up. He typed fast, thumb moving like he was putting out a fire. That's when I noticed the time on the grandfather clock in the hall, 6:42 p.m. I remember because Dad used to set that clock by hand twice a year, muttering about how time had to be respected even when people weren't. At 6:44, Derek stood and lifted a folded card from beside Sloane's plate. My name. Elena. He walked toward me with the smile again. You can move up, he said, voice dripping fake warmth. We need you closer to the kitchen. You know, helpful. The word helpful landed like a slap. I didn't stand right away. Not because I wanted to fight. Because my body couldn't decide if this was real. Derek's smile hardened. Come on, he said, louder. Don't make this awkward. The room went still. Fork stopped. Someone's chair squeaked. My mother didn't move. I stood, finally, and reached for my plate. Derek reached for the chair. He didn't wait for me to step aside. He pulled it out, hard. My heel caught the runner rug. My knee hit wood. I fell sideways, shoulder clipping the table edge. The room lurched. A bowl of sweet potatoes slid, tipped, and spilled across the tablecloth like an orange bruise. Pain shot through my knee and up my thigh. My hands shook as I tried to push myself up. And then... silence. No gasp. No rush. No hands reaching for me. Just the soft, humiliating sound of someone chewing. My grandmother's lips parted, trembling, but she didn't stand. She was 82 and tired and trapped in a family that had trained itself not to intervene. My cousin Maribel half rose, then froze when Derek's eyes snapped to her. She sat back down like she'd been pushed. Derek looked at me on the floor and said, lightly, careful. We don't want a scene. A scene. My knee throbbed. My face burned. The smell of cedar garland mixed with Derek's cologne and warm gravy, and suddenly I understood the basement of rock bottom perfectly. But I had no idea what was coming next. Because Derek's phone buzzed on the sideboard. And from where I sat on the floor, I could see the screen light up with a message preview. We can't float payroll and Sloane's card. Bank wants statements by Monday. My stomach dropped. Derek snatched the phone, glanced at it, then, too late, noticed me looking. Something cold flickered in his eyes. I got up without help. I picked up my napkin, wiped sweet potato off my sleeve, and said, quietly, Happy Thanksgiving. My mother finally looked at me then. Her eyes were wet. Her mouth opened. And then she shut it again. That was the betrayal that cut deepest. I walked out with my knee screaming and my dignity in pieces. But on my way past the sideboard, I let my hand brush Derek's phone, just once, like I was steadying myself. Long enough to see the top of the thread. Long enough to see a name, Keller Capital. Long enough to know this wasn't just cruelty. It was leverage. I drove home with my knee wrapped in a dish towel because I couldn't bring myself to go back inside for the first aid kit. I kept my headlights low like I was sneaking away from a crime scene. In my apartment, the florist downstairs had turned off her shop lights, but the scent of crushed roses drifted up through the vents anyway, sweet, bruised, too alive. I made coffee at 8:17 p.m. even though it was too late for coffee. Humiliation pairs better with caffeine than with sleep. I sat at my little kitchen table, staring at my hands, waiting for my heartbeat to stop sounding like a door being kicked in. Then my phone buzzed. Family group chat. Someone had posted a photo of the dinner table, perfect lighting, everyone smiling. My empty chair blurred at the edge of the frame like a mistake they planned to crop out later. Maribel texted privately, "I'm sorry. I tried." He looked at me and I froze. "I hate myself." I wrote back, "Don't. That look has years in it." Because it did. Derek's cruelty wasn't new. It just got louder over time, like he was testing how far he could go. When Dad was alive, Derek didn't exist in our world. We were the hearts, Mom, Dad, me, busy, imperfect, solid. Dad built Harborline Freight with stubbornness and a kind of quiet pride. He didn't do flashy. He did reliable. Employees stayed because he remembered their kids' names and fixed things before they broke. When he got sick, he tried to keep working anyway. Then he couldn't. Then he was gone. My mother was a widow at 46. She wore grief like a heavy coat she couldn't take off. And Derek Mallory showed up at exactly the right time. He met her at a charity board event, the kind with silent auctions and polite sadness. He was helpful. He offered to handle paperwork. He brought dinners. He spoke softly in public. In private, he organized her life until she didn't recognize it as control. The favoritism started small. Sloane needed support. Derek paid for her apartment. Sloane needed a fresh start. Derek paid off her credit card. Sloane needed a business loan. Derek found a way. Meanwhile, I worked my first full-time job while studying nights for a certification I didn't even know if I wanted. Every time I came home, Derek had a new lecture about independence. "You're tough," he'd say, like it was a compliment. "You don't need help." He said it the way someone says, "You don't deserve it." For years, I couldn't prove anything. Not the money, not the shifting ownership, not the subtle rewriting of Dad's legacy. But I noticed details. Derek would slip into Dad's old office and close the door. He'd take phone calls that ended the moment someone walked in. He'd talk about new partners and leveraging assets like those words were prayers. Dad used to say the truth always left fingerprints. I just didn't know where to look. Tonight, I knew where to look. I went to my closet and dragged out the one thing I'd never opened, a metal lockbox my grandmother gave me 2 years ago. She'd pressed it into my hands at a funeral reception for a distant cousin, her face blank, her voice barely a whisper. "Your father trusted documents," she'd said. "He didn't trust people. Keep this." Inside the lockbox was a key on a faded blue ribbon and a small envelope with my name written in Dad's handwriting. My knee ached as I sat back down, heart beating too hard. I opened the envelope. 2 things fell out: a safety deposit box slip for First Harbor Bank. A tiny USB drive labeled, in Dad's careful print, "If you need it." My hands went cold. If only I knew what I was walking into. I plugged the USB into my laptop. A folder appeared, plain and unassuming, like it didn't know it held a storm. Inside, scanned documents, emails, copies of contracts, organized by date. And one file that made my breath catch, trust summary, Elena Hart beneficiary. I opened it. The trust was real. It was detailed. It was specific. Dad had placed his controlling interest in Harborline into a trust held by an independent trustee, his old attorney, Nora Reyes, until certain conditions were met. The conditions were twofold: when I turned 32. Or when evidence of fraud or coercion emerged affecting the business or the home. My birthday was in 9 days. My mouth went dry. I scrolled. There were clauses about safeguarding the family home. Clauses preventing transfer of ownership without trustee approval. Clauses about mandatory reporting if a management authority was altered through undue influence. In other words, Dad expected this. And then I found a letter addressed to me. It wasn't long. Elena, if you're reading this, you already know that love can be used as a mask. You don't need rage. You need proof. There is a person who knows where the bodies are buried. Her name is Nora Reyes. Trust the process. And remember, boundaries aren't cruelty. They're clarity. Dad, I sat back, shaking. My phone buzzed again, this time, a voicemail from my mother. I didn't listen yet. I couldn't. I opened another file, property records. The house, our house, had a second lien I didn't recognize. Then a third. My stomach dropped. I opened an email chain between Derek and someone from Keller Capital. It was all polite language hiding sharp teeth. We require updated financials and proof of collateral coverage. We have concerns about liquidity. We will not extend the bridge again without revised terms. Bridge. Collateral. Liquidity. I'd seen this before. It meant, you're running out of time. I stood, limping, and paced my kitchen. I needed more than a folder and a key. I needed current proof. That's when I remembered Derek's phone. The message preview. Keller Capital. Payroll. Statements by Monday. So I did what my job trained me to do. I built a timeline. I wrote down, Thanksgiving humiliation, 6:44 p.m. Message preview seen, seconds after. My birthday, 9 days away. Bank wants statements by Monday, 4 days. Derek was racing the clock. Which meant I could, too. But I had no idea what was coming next. Because when I finally played my mother's voicemail, her voice sounded wrong. Elena, she said, breathy. Please call me. Derek's, he's upset. He says you're going to do something. Please don't do anything. Just call me. She didn't say, are you okay? She didn't say, I'm sorry. She said, don't do anything. Like truth was the danger. I stared at the screen until it blurred. Then I grabbed my coat, my keys, and the blue ribbon key. First Harbor Bank was 10 minutes away. The safety deposit box slip had Dad's name. But the beneficiary line had mine. A young teller led me to a private room and brought out a long, rectangular box. My hands shook as I opened it. Inside were 3 items, a sealed envelope labeled for Nora Reyes, a spiral notebook, Dad's handwriting, pages of notes, dates, initials, the blue fountain pen. I laughed, once, sharp and sad. Even in death, he was leaving breadcrumbs. The notebook wasn't a diary. It was Dad being Dad, lists, numbers, observations. He'd been recording things before he died. A line jumped out at me, Derek using operations account like personal credit line. Check wire outs. Below it, Sloan, startup, spend through vendor ACCT, Then, in the margin, circled, Nora has full file. I took everything home and sat at my table again, coffee cold now, my knees stiff. At 2:12 a.m., I called Nora Reyes. She answered on the second ring like she'd been waiting. Elena, she said quietly. I wondered when you'd call. My throat tightened. He knew. Yes, she said. And he planned for the day you'd be ready to see it. I swallowed. What do I do? Nora didn't rush me. You do it clean, she said. And you do it in daylight. We'll start with a preservation order. Then an injunction. And Elena, listen to me, do not touch Derek's devices again. What you saw is enough to justify discovery. Let the court do the digging. My compliance brain calmed slightly at the word discovery. A process. A system. A path. And Elena, Nora added, voice firm, if Derek thinks you're going to move, he may try to move faster. Be prepared for retaliation. I stared at the window, the night pressing against it. Retaliation. I knew that word, too. The next morning, my knee swollen, I went to work anyway. I told HR I'd tripped on stairs. It wasn't a lie. It just wasn't the whole truth. At 10:06 a.m., Nora emailed me a draft petition for emergency relief, a request to freeze certain transactions pending review of trust terms and recent liens. Reading it felt like stepping onto a bridge I couldn't see the end of. Because once I filed it, Derek would know. Once I filed it, my mother would be forced to choose between comfort and clarity. And I didn't know if she could. If only I knew what I was walking into. At 12:30, I got another message, this time from Maribel. Derek's telling everyone you assaulted him. He says you threw yourself and tried to make him look bad. He's demanding people sign statements. My stomach tightened. Statements. Derek was already building a narrative. At 1:15, my phone rang. Unknown number. I answered. Elena Hart, a man asked. Yes. This is Carson Pike. I represent Derek Mallory. My pulse spiked. Mr. Mallory is concerned, Pike continued smoothly, that you have unlawfully accessed private communications and are preparing to spread defamatory claims. We are prepared to pursue damages and seek injunctive relief against you personally. I gripped my phone harder. On what basis? On the basis that your behavior has been obsessive, he said lightly. And frankly, disturbing. Disturbing. The old trick, make the truth-teller sound unstable. He added, if you proceed, you may endanger your employment. Mr. Mallory is connected. It would be unfortunate if your reputation suffered. I stared at my laptop screen, at Nora's drafted petition waiting for my signature. My hands shook, not from fear of Derek, not exactly. From the old, familiar ache of being treated like I was too small to matter. And that's when everything shifted. Because something in me finally snapped into place, not rage, but clarity. I said, Carson, you can put whatever threats you want into a sentence. But if Derek did nothing wrong, he should welcome review. Tell him to enjoy discovery. There was a pause. Then Pike's voice turned colder. You're making a mistake. I ended the call. 2 minutes later, my work email locked. A message popped up, administrative leave pending investigation. My stomach dropped. Derek had moved faster than I expected. He'd found a way to touch my life where it hurt. My manager texted me, HR says there was a complaint about misuse of confidential processes. Call me when you can. I sat back in my chair, heart pounding. He was trying to discredit me before I could move. And for a split second, just a split, I wondered if my mother was right. If doing anything would make it worse. But then I looked at my knee, bruised and swollen, and remembered the silence. I opened Nora's petition. I signed it. I sent it back. And I wrote one sentence in my reply, proceed. But I had no idea what was coming next. Derek didn't wait for the court. He went public. Not news vans outside the building, public, something quieter, more local, more poisonous, neighborhood gossip, church whispers, carefully planted concern. By Monday morning, my phone was full of messages from distant relatives I barely knew. Are you okay? People are saying you're spiraling. Your poor mother. Derek has been so patient with you. Patient. As if patience was what you called pushing someone out of a chair. Then the letter arrived, a demand to retract allegations, a threat of a civil suit for interference, and a warning that Derek would seek to have me declared financially unstable to protect the business from my impulsivity. He was trying to make me look like a risk. At 3 p.m., Nora called me. "Derek filed first," she said. My throat tightened. "Filed what?" "A petition to remove the trustee," she replied. "He's claiming Nora Reyes is acting in bad faith and that your father was manipulated into creating restrictive instruments under duress." My stomach turned. Dad, under duress? Dad, who didn't let anyone pick his coffee brand? It was absurd. But absurd things can still damage you if the right people repeat them. Nora's voice stayed steady. "We expected retaliation. Here's what we do, we get ahead of facts. We request expedited discovery. And Elena, there's something else." I held my breath. "There's a recording," Nora said. "Your father made it 2 weeks before he died. He left it with me with instructions, do not give it to you unless Derek forced the issue." A recording. My skin prickled. "What's on it?" I asked. Nora exhaled. "A meeting. Derek in your father's office. Talking about options. Talking about what happens if your mother doesn't cooperate." My stomach clenched. Options. Cooperate. Words that don't belong near grief. "If we use it," Nora warned, "it becomes part of the record. It will hurt your mother." I swallowed hard. It already did. A long pause. Then Nora said, quietly, "Okay. Then we use it strategically." That night, I sat in my apartment with my knee elevated, listening to the recording through earbuds. Dad's voice was faint, tired, but calm. Derek's voice was unmistakable, warm, coaxing, like a salesman. "You want your wife taken care of, Graham," Derek said. "You want Sloane taken care of. You want the business stable. That requires decisions." Dad coughed. Derek continued, "And if the trust gets in the way, people get confused. Your wife gets confused. She might sign the wrong thing. It'd be tragic." My hands went cold. Dad's voice, steadier than I expected, "Are you threatening my wife?" Derek chuckled softly. "I'm being practical." Dad replied, "If you ever put pressure on her, I'll bury you in paperwork." Even sick, Dad was Dad. And Derek, smiling voice, said, "Paperwork can be revised." That line sat in my chest like a stone. If only I knew what I was walking into. Because at 11:37 p.m., Maribel sent me a voice note, whispering like she was afraid her phone might betray her. "Elena," she said, "I need you to know something. Derek's been meeting with people at the warehouse. Late at night. Trucks are leaving with no manifests. And," her breath hitched, "Sloane said something about selling inventory fast before your birthday." My scalp prickled. No manifests. Selling inventory fast. He was trying to drain the business before the trust triggered. And that's when everything shifted. I stopped thinking like a wounded daughter. I started thinking like an investigator. I emailed Nora, "We need an emergency motion to preserve assets. Tonight." Then I did something I'd never done in my personal life. I made a plan that included other people. I called Maribel. I called the one employee I still trusted, Dawn, Harborline's operations manager, who'd worked with Dad since the first warehouse. Dawn answered on the first ring. "Elena," she said, voice tight. I was wondering when someone was going to say this out loud. I swallowed. "Do you have access to shipping logs?" "Not all of them," she said. "Derek locked down the system. But I have paper backups." He hates paper. Your dad loved it. Of course. Paper is hard to erase. Dawn, I said carefully, I'm going to ask you something. I'm not asking you to risk your job. I'm asking you to protect the company from being gutted. Dawn didn't hesitate. Tell me what you need. We set up a meeting for the next morning at a coffee shop near the warehouse. A quiet place. Public enough to feel safe. Before I slept, if you can call 2 hours of staring at the ceiling sleeping, I recorded a message on my phone. Not for Derek. For myself. A boundary, spoken aloud. I'm not doing this to punish anyone, I said into the dark. I'm doing it to restore what was stolen and to stop it from happening again. If people are uncomfortable with truth, they can sit with that discomfort. I'm done shrinking to keep peace. I replayed it once. Then I closed my eyes. But I had no idea what was coming next. The hearing was set for Friday. 4 days. Derek had already started selling. Dawn confirmed it with trembling hands, sliding paper logs across a cafe table like they were contraband. Look, she said, tapping the dates. These shipments don't match any contracts. The invoices are routed through a company I've never heard of. I stared at the names stamped at the top, Mallory Trade Services. A shell. A siphon. Dawn's voice cracked. He's using our warehouse like a piggy bank. I took photos of everything, careful, clean, documented. Then I did what compliance trained me to do. I escalated through proper channels. Nora filed an emergency motion with the court that afternoon, attaching the trust terms, the newly discovered liens, and Dawn's logs as evidence of imminent dissipation. She also, at my request, submitted Dad's recording under seal, with a request for judicial review in camera to protect my mother from unnecessary public harm. Not revenge. Precision. By Thursday, the court granted a temporary restraining order. No asset transfers. No unusual shipments. No new loans. No movement without oversight. Derek responded by showing up at my apartment. Not screaming. Not banging. Smiling. He stood in the hallway like he owned the air, hands in his coat pockets. Elena, he said softly. This is getting out of hand. I didn't invite him in. That's interesting, I said. You didn't think pushing me out of a chair was out of hand. His smile flickered. You fell. I stared at him. Do you hear yourself? He leaned closer. You're making your mother suffer. My chest tightened. There it was. The lever. I took a breath. I'm not responsible for what you did to her, I said. I'm responsible for what I do now. His eyes sharpened. Your job is gone. Your reputation is gone. You'll burn everything down, and for what? To feel important? I kept my voice calm. To stop you from stealing what isn't yours. Derek exhaled through his nose like I was a child being difficult. Name your price. I blinked. He said it again, slower. Name your price, Elena. We can make this go away. You can disappear back into your little apartment. I'll make sure you land somewhere. Quiet. Quiet. Like silence was the goal. Like my existence was a problem. I felt something settle in me, heavy and steady. I don't want money, I said. I want you out. His smile vanished. And that's when everything shifted. Because for the first time, Derek looked afraid. He stepped back, then leaned in again, voice low. You're not built for this. I met his eyes. You're right, I said. I'm built for systems. And systems are built to catch people like you. He left without another word. Friday arrived with sleet that turned the streets into mirrors. In court, Derek walked in with a polished attorney and a stack of papers meant to intimidate. My mother sat behind him, hands folded, face pale. She didn't look at me at first. When she finally did, her eyes were rimmed red. The judge, an older woman with tired patience, opened by reminding everyone that this was not a theater. Then she reviewed the restraining order and asked Derek's counsel why the court should lift it. Derek's lawyer spoke smoothly about family conflict, misinterpretations, and a grieving daughter seeking control. Then Nora stood. Nora didn't raise her voice. She didn't dramatize. She walked the judge through dates, liens, shipping logs, and trust clauses like she was assembling a lock. Finally, she asked permission to submit the sealed recording for the judge's private review. The judge agreed. Derek's lawyer objected. Derek's jaw clenched. The judge listened to the recording with headphones, face unreadable. When she finished, she set the headphones down slowly. "Mr. Mallory," she said, "do you understand that what I've heard sounds like coercion?" Derek opened his mouth. The judge held up a hand. "Don't." Then she turned to my mother. "Mrs. Hart Mallory," she said gently, "did you knowingly authorize these liens?" My mother's hands trembled. Her voice came out small. "Derek said it was temporary," she whispered. "He said it was to stabilize things." The judge nodded, like she'd heard this story before. Nora stood again. "Your Honor," she said, "we also have a request for appointment of a forensic accountant and an independent operations monitor. We believe there is substantial evidence of diversion through entities linked to Mr. Mallory." Derek's lawyer scoffed, then recovered. "Speculation." Dawn stood from the back of the courtroom. "Permission to speak?" Dawn asked, voice shaking but clear. The judge hesitated, then nodded. Dawn held up a folder. "I worked for Graham Hart for 19 years, she said. "I've never seen missing manifests until Derek Mallory started locking us out. I have paper logs. I have invoices. And I have employees who are scared to talk because they have kids." The courtroom went quiet. A different kind of silence. Not complicity. Attention. My mother started crying, quiet, contained sobs, like something in her had cracked open. The judge issued an order right there: expanded injunction, immediate appointment of a forensic accountant, and mandatory preservation of all business records. She also referred the matter to the state attorney's office for review of potential fraud. Derek's lawyer's face tightened. Derek's face went gray. Outside the courtroom, my mother approached me with steps that looked unfamiliar, hesitant, unsure, like she didn't trust the ground. "Elena," she said, voice broken. I waited. "I didn't," she started, then stopped. Her eyes squeezed shut. "I didn't help you." I watched. I froze. The memory of Thanksgiving flashed, my knee on the floor, her silence. My throat tightened. She whispered, "I was so afraid of what he'd do if I fought." I believed her. That didn't erase what happened. But it explained the shape of it. "I can't undo it," she said. "But I want to stop living like this." I took a slow breath. "Then you start telling the truth," I said. "Even when it makes you uncomfortable." She nodded, tears falling. And for the first time in years, she looked present. But I had no idea what was coming next. Because the forensic accountant found more than we expected. Not dramatic movie crimes, real, ugly, layered financial abuse. Hidden lines of credit. Shell invoices. Vendor kickbacks. Payroll floats. And the worst, Derek had used my mother's signature on documents she swore she never saw. Forgery. 2 weeks later, Derek was removed as acting manager by court order. The trustee's authority snapped into place like a seatbelt. And 9 days after Thanksgiving, on my birthday, the trust activated. Not with fireworks. With a quiet email from Nora, Elena, control has transferred. Harborline is legally yours. I sat in my apartment, staring at the screen, hands shaking. I thought I'd feel triumph. Instead, I felt something softer. A release. Like my lungs finally had room. The legal process didn't destroy Derek overnight. That wouldn't be real. It unfolded in steps: investigations, depositions, negotiated exits, and, eventually, criminal charges for fraud and forgery. Derek didn't go to prison immediately. That takes time. But he lost what mattered most to him right away: control. Narrative. Access. Sloan tried to text me a week later, "You ruined everything." I stared at it, then typed one sentence: "No. I stopped you from ruining more." Then I blocked her. Boundaries aren't cruelty. They're clarity. By January, Harborline was still standing. Dawn helped me rebuild operations transparently. We hired an independent auditor. We restored employee access. We reported what needed reporting. I returned to work too, after my bank's investigation cleared me. My leave ended with an apology that tasted like bureaucracy, but I took it anyway. Systems don't feel remorse. They just correct course. And I began to do something I'd never done before: I took up space. 3 months later, we held a family dinner again. Not at the old house. My mother sold it. "Too many ghosts," she said, eyes steady this time. "And not all of them are Dad's." We gathered at my grandmother's townhouse, small, warm, no room for performance. The table wasn't perfect. The food was slightly oversalted. Someone forgot the serving spoon for the salad. It was the most honest meal we'd had in years. My mother arrived early, wearing a red scarf Dad once bought her at a roadside market. She'd started therapy. Not the feel better kind, the hard kind where you name things correctly even when naming them hurts. She approached me before anyone else could talk. "I'm sorry," she said, voice clear. "Not for being fooled. Grief makes fools of us all. I'm sorry for choosing quiet over you." I didn't rush to forgive. I didn't punish her either. I said, "Thank you for saying it out loud." And that was enough for that day. At the end of the night, my grandmother brought out a small box and handed it to me with a look that dared me to argue. Inside was Dad's blue fountain pen. "I kept it safe," she said, "because I knew you'd sign something important one day." The next morning, I sat in Harborline's office, Dad's office, sunlight cutting across the desk. I used the pen to sign 2 documents: a profit-sharing plan for employees, a scholarship fund for the driver's kids, quiet help that didn't need applause. Justice wasn't revenge. It was balance. And when Thanksgiving came again the next year, I set a place card at the table. Not a throne. Not a trophy. Just a seat. My name written clearly. Elena. Because I was family. And this time, nobody stayed silent about it. If you liked this story, feel free to subscribe and turn on the bell so you don't miss the next one.